Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for tuning into the IOEO Podcast. I'm your host, Jon, and today we're here to talk about everything. Yesterday was my birthday. I'm 25 years old now. It means I can do a couple things. I can work for Lyft. I think I can rent a house, as much as that's really important to me now. But among other things, I've decided that there's going to be some changes in my life. Maybe we'll get into that, but I had some discussions with some people today, and a lot's going to be happening. Some exciting stuff that I'd love to be able to share with you guys. So firstly, it's just me today. Last time we had Aiden on, and actually he does his own podcast now. So I do want to say a little bit about that. Everybody, if you guys want to check out Aiden's podcast, his channel, it is The Ignorant Gnostic, which is cool because we talked about some of that when I had him on. But yeah, absolutely, go check out his podcast. He had one of his friends, I believe his name was Noel, on there. And they seemed like a very educated individual, so they had a pretty cool conversation. I would compel everybody who enjoys our videos so far or enjoys our way of presenting information to go check out him as well. Similarly, my business partner might be, or I say might be, more so he will be, just not quite yet, making his own podcast as well. It makes me happy to know that some of the people I've been able to not so much influence directly, but have been charitable in my ways of teaching, I share what I know with them, and they're worth it to share it with. So they've done, or they will do, something good with it. So my business partner, he'll be doing something similar as well. I'll let him speak for himself when that time comes, and we might even be able to have him on tomorrow when we record. But today's episode is more going to be about all of the things coming up. It's kind of like an interim video. I just had to get one of these out. Obviously, I hope, as everybody knows, we just had the holidays and everything. I'll put it this way. Last Sunday, so not yesterday, but last Sunday was basically the beginning of a very busy week until, just yesterday. So on Sunday was my niece's baptism, and we got to celebrate that with the other half of the family as well, being my sister's husband, or my brother-in-law and his family. And then on the day after that was my father's birthday. And then later in the week is Thanksgiving, and that was also my grandfather's birthday. And then the day after that, which was Friday, I had my birthday celebration with my family. And then on Sunday was my actual birthday, which we didn't really do too much, but I still celebrated myself. So it's been a little bit of a busy time for sure. And getting into the holidays this time of year, it's just difficult to get a lot of stuff done. However, I will be making sure that we can provide as many podcast episodes for you guys because I'm personally having a good time. I think a lot of people are seeing these and it's making them think of things differently. And when we evaluate why we feel a certain way or why we have a certain amount of information, why we were interested in the first place to look into it, to learn about it, it starts to impact the people around us with, kind of our vessel of what we fill it with, right? If that makes any sense. We have all the information to our, at our fingertips these days. If you have a smartphone and access to the internet, you can answer any question basically, Not necessarily without like a tuned bias or if you're looking for advice in your life. But, even these days, you can go to a word engine or a ChatGPT or an AI of any sorts and say, hey, XYZ. I'll tell you guys a little bit about what I'm kind of getting at here. Just yesterday, I had the opportunity of saying something really terrible to somebody. And I didn't, and I won't actually speak to them at all. But long story short, it was a family member of mine. I'll put as far as my brother, my only brother. Unfortunately, we don't really get along. And outside of what I feel comfortable sharing with you guys today, he's just not a good person. If he's watching this in any capacity, I think he already knows that he's not a good person. So me saying it to the crowds of people I hope to, accumulate shouldn't really matter much. But at the end of the day, as much as I do preach that people should have more consideration towards people, at some point in your life, you will have to understand that not everybody is worth it. And so in this regard, my brother wasn't worth saying anything back to when he texted me, happy birthday. I didn't want to really plan on hearing from him, considering he doesn't come to holidays, he doesn't come to weddings, he doesn't come to baby showers. He's not really in the family. And he's done some really terrible things more recently in the past year, this year, last year. And I kind of consider myself without a brother at this point. I haven't seen him really significantly in almost 4 years. I've seen him on occasions of life and death. So, when something happens to the family where it's like, you might lose somebody important to you, that's the last opportunity. Yeah, I bet your ass you'll be there. And what I mean, last time I saw him, it was in the hospital when one of my family members needed to get surgery. Because that was kind of scary. But since then, no. He's tried to yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that, honestly, because I can go on forever. But the purpose of today's episode is not going to be to gripe about my relationship with my brother. But it's more so to say that, well, the entire tonality of this podcast is going to be a little different today. Um, we're just going to talk about things that are coming up, basically. And for right now, what I'd like to say is with everybody's access to information, I'm happy to see that the people that are filling themselves with more information are doing it in a similar regard to which we are. At least through the principles of this podcast, what I like to promote, what I'd like to say that other people should probably try to do, or, I set an example. If people think it's a good idea, then they follow along. I'm not necessarily asking people to follow along, but it does make me feel good to know that I've made an impression, and a positive impression, for people to feel like they could accomplish the things they want to do. And I've said this before in the podcast, and this isn't a quote of myself. I didn't come up with this, but do more of what makes you happy. Do more of what makes you happy. My business partner, he's had an interest in things like this for a while. We talked about when he was younger, quite a few years ago, I think, while we were in school. He had interest in things like this, and I'm just happy that he feels comfortable enough, or at the very least, he feels like I'm a resource to him, that he's able to ask me questions and then feel comfortable enough to pursue this extracurricular for his life. Not everybody has the opportunity to make videos, but a lot of us do, at least in the United States. If, like I said, you have a smartphone, if you have access to the internet, you could basically get whatever type of information you want. But it's with that, it's like, what do you do with that information? So he chose to and like I said, I'm a resource to him. So he's able to ask me some questions, and I'm happy to help, very happy to help. And for everybody else as well, it makes me happy to know that if somebody works with me and they have a good impression with me, and they feel like they've learned something, then it will become more, that they'll actually take what I've learned, take what I've learned and what they've learned from me, and then build upon it and do something with it. And that is the point of sharing anything. The worthiness of sharing information is the duality that you have to be done, or something needs to be done with that same information. You can talk until the cows come home, right? But unless you take that and you make an actionable, enforceable statement, or you do something, then you start to change the world for the better, or at least in the regard you're hoping to change it for the better. People can have bad intentions when they do things, and that's for somebody's own self-conviction to understand if they're doing, good or wrong, or good or bad. But those are such floppy terms in my understanding so far. What is good, what is bad, in which regard. So it's almost not important to worry about those specific things. So I just hope that when I share information, people take it and they actually do something with it, because that means that it's not for nothing. It's worth me sharing that information. So if anything, I have to say, like, go check out, check out Aiden for sure, the Ignorant Gnostic. Go check out his podcast, his first episode he just posted last night. But just as well, thank you for taking what I've been able to share with you and do something constructive with it, because it makes me feel worthy, and it makes me feel like it was worth sharing with you. So furthermore, with all of that, I think they're probably going to be on again sometime. So get excited for that if you guys enjoyed the last two episodes. We posted, that was the first time I actually did a two-parter. And yes, I did still call it episode 12, and I just said that it was called part 2. I like that personally. Why not? It's not like a big deal. It's not very difficult to change the thumbnails to like put something else in there. But I still wanted to have the same, because we did talk about some things as well. And maybe I'll touch on that just for a second. But yes, so because we did end up talking about things that were a little bit different at the end. So in part 2, we didn't just talk about religion, philosophy. We also talked about politics, and we actually did have a little bit of a debate, which had me thinking for a second, should we actually entertain this on this channel? And I came to the conclusion that we will. We will be entertaining political discourse and discussions on this podcast. And reason B is because if we isolate it into selective, every couple weeks, maybe once a month, we have like a political opportunity for people to speak, and we share things. Because to be somebody who is attracted to knowledge, somebody who wants to learn more, it's important to take all realms of information. And when you say that we're not going to talk about one specific thing because it's controversial, all information is controversial depending on how you use it. So just by saying we're not going to talk about politics, it's a little ignorant on our part. But that's why we have allowed the discussion of politics, because this is not a black and white world. It's barely a black, white, and gray world. There are millions, billions of colors, just for a circumstance of this analogy. But basically, there's so many different ways to do things that we can't necessarily say which is the best or worst. We can just try our best and expect the worst, right? But I'm very happy with how everything's gone so far. And this is my way of telling people, like, basically keep going. You got it, so keep going with it. So when we have very nuanced discussions about all realms of topics and information, it would be ignorant to leave out specific fractions of information, simply because by definition, we don't want to alienate people with our exposure of political beliefs or understandings. But we'll just, like we have so far with all the information we present on this podcast, we give it without bias, and we present information with the hope of furthering understanding. And that's the biggest point. We hope to further understanding. That is it. Build consideration towards your fellow man. Learn their name, learn their face, learn their person, and have a larger conversation about the nuances of life. That's not just, okay, this is going to fulfill my confirmation or my bias, or, sorry, wrong word. I'm thinking of confirmation bias, but this is just going to confirm my bias. We are very analytical in our pursuit of information as well, because we're understanding that it is popular to share things like this. And that does well for this podcast, and that kind of helps us along our path of, wanting to be popular and also wanting to reach a larger audience, which by definition is just being more popular. Just as well, it's important for us to have a section for these thoughts, because I'll say it one more time. And lastly, it is in a certain degree ignorant to think that we shouldn't share information because it's, that technically is a bias. It's an open bias, and then a lot of other people can see why we have it or why we would do that, but it's not, but it's still a bias regardless. So we will absolutely have opportunities for people to share political opinions, and we'll have debates for sure. As a matter of fact, I'll ask you guys, we're not too far into this podcast, so that'll be a good time. If people can hopefully stick around for, the entire rest of the video. But at the very least, you had just heard this question. What would you like to see in terms of how we structure the debates on this channel? Last time that I had somebody on, we just had like an open debate, and it was basically my opinions and my thoughts and my factual bases against his same. So it's with that in mind that as long as we're courteous and we're able to hold a civil conversation, like no name calling, no belittlement on a person's character. Basically, if you have to resort to calling somebody a name on this podcast, or just in total, if you're losing the argument. So if somebody says, well, I think Hillary Clinton should have been president, or whatever, and you say, well, I think you're a loser for that, I'm going to interject and say, okay, right now you're going to forfeit this argument because you clearly could not come up with a better reason besides attacking his personal character. So now, what do I have to do? Either I will say, okay, I'll debate for him. So are you going to attack my character as well on my podcast? Because if that's the case, I'll just kick you off, I'm not saying I'm going to be a wimp, and if somebody's going to say something and it's like moderately, okay, well, that's kind of rude or maybe a little antagonizing, but it's not necessarily like a personal or direct attack. Yeah, we're going to let that slide, because there is a certain upwards limit of what I would suggest is okay. We'll use that word. Standard, basically, for the podcast. If somebody is like immediately swearing like crazy and they're very adamantly stubborn, like they're not going to change their mind, even if we're, if somebody says, for example, that one thing is like blue, and you're like, sir, that's red, and you're like, no, that's blue. And I'm the moderator, and I'll be like, okay, well, I'll be honest with you, it is blue, or it is red, whatever my example was, sorry. And if that person is just like adamantly ignorant or stubborn to accept the information, we don't necessarily want to entertain that, because that sets an example that's a way to win an argument, and we don't want to promote that on our channel. So I will absolutely hold time for political discourse. It'll be very rare. In the terms of as our other videos, I want to make upwards of 5 videos a week. I'm thinking maybe 5 might be too many. We'll have to see you guys might want like 2 videos a day. I highly doubt that. to make like 10 or to make 14 videos a week, 2 a day, and each one's like a podcast. I try to make at least one a day. Not the podcast. I don't try to do the podcast every day. Sorry, this is a side tangent. But just as well, if you guys believe that we should have more content on the channel, or that you're really loving the content and you don't think I should space it out, like I should just try to make as many new episodes as I possibly can, then by all means, I'll try my best, and I can, make this a full-time deal. At the time, it's pretty part-time. I'd say I spend each week, I'd probably spend about 10 to 15 hours doing the podcasts. And that, well, maybe even more, maybe upwards of 20 on occasion, because sometimes it is, not just doing the podcast. It's like reaching out to the businesses. It's reaching out to the people that we're going to have for music. It's posting things where, setting up social media accounts. That's just like whatever work. That's like blah. But it's still time, I could say, is dedicated to furthering the ambitions of the podcast. So we will have some people on. And when I had a conversation with Dom, and he was a good resource for this, I had mentioned that for him, I try to say I'm a moderate. I don't like appeasing to political ideologies, and I don't like to say that I'm part of a political ideology, but I had taken like the political compass tests, and that suggested that, okay, if this is where you stand, I had to modify some answers, I will say, because some of them were in a way of, okay, well, that's not how I truly feel, but for this answer, like how I feel is not listed, right? I think there's like 5 choices for each one, and I just didn't feel compelled enough to pick the one that felt exactly like mine, so it was like close enough. But I have said before, I am a moderate in the way of I could sit in the middle. I'm a middleman, right? I see things on the conservative side that are valuable, and I see things on the liberal side that are valuable. I also see things on both sides that are erratic and insane, in my personal opinion. I won't get into that in this video today, but perhaps in a future video we can talk about that. I do have to be careful as well for one reason. As a business owner, there had been a time in the past where there was a picture taken of me at a Black Lives Matter protest. Mind you, I did not go to this protest. It was just happening in downtown Binghamton in 2020. And as I was walking around, I had my fist in the air, right? But that, for me, what everybody was speaking of, for me, that was solidarity against forms of violence and racial profiling. And it's very difficult because, we're not going to get into politics, so I'm not even going to say where I stand on Black Lives Matter for this fact. Hopefully that doesn't allude to like a worse or a better understanding of where I stand, but we're just not going to comment on that. I'll give you this example. Maybe this will help shed some light on the situation. I try my best to help people that I understand are being racially profiled, or that are being prejudiced, or that are basically facing prejudice based on their skin tone or their race. Things like that, it makes me sick. It truly does make me upset to know that, like, as long as this country's been around, or as long as this entire human collective civilization has been around, we still have biases are okay on some occasion, but like racist biases, can get bad, but it's the prejudice against another person from where they come from. We are all mutts of people. Even people that are black have all different types of races in them at this point. Like, it's going to be 2025. And myself, I'm a white guy. If you go back far enough, I did the 23andMe. So yeah, I did 23andMe. I could tell you with certainty now. I challenge the validity of those tests for sure. It could have just been anything, but it did actually say that I had some Egyptian in me and Northern African as well. I'm not going to say I'm black in any regard. I think it was like 33% Irish, and I was like, yeah. Then it was like 22% Italian, and I was like, wow, okay. And then, German, French, and Norwegian, I think Norwegian, and my last name is Swedish, and we have family from Sweden, so I can only assume. I'm not a big deal to it now, but regardless, what I'm trying to get at is I really don't stand for racist behavior or prejudice on the basis of, or discrimination towards somebody because of race. And I am somebody who will stick up for people, and I have on occasion too. Quick side note, story to give an example of as far as I've gone. This is the farthest I've gone. An individual, a friend of mine, I won't say his name, but he was a black friend of mine, and we had gone down to Pennsylvania, a pretty racist place, actually. Northeastern Pennsylvania, not a good place to be if you're a black person or a minority in most regards. Minority is actually what I've found sometimes to be derogatory. Some people have told me that it's generalizing people, but it's also could be derogatory because it might not be a minority. Like where I live, actually, I believe that the white population is in the minority. So, the collective, there's the highest population of any people in the United States is Caucasian white people, but that doesn't mean that for certain populations, they're not in the minority, right? So it's like generalizing. It's like, what is a minority to you? So that's why we try to steer clear from using that direct terminology. So, but I'll say basically, if you're not white and there's white cops that are in northeastern Pennsylvania, you probably are going to get a harder time. And especially with what happened, I still stand by my decision to do what I did. I'll tell you what I did. This is a great story. So, story time with Jon. So, for one of my friend's birthdays, we had decided, since he was turning 21, that the year prior, we were going to save as much keef in a grinder, a big grinder, that I got for my birthday one year, and then smoke it all on his birthday. We're in New York, so this is legal for us. We could talk about it. Mind you, it's not legal in Pennsylvania. So, we had gone down there, and there was a bunch of friends, and I don't drink. I still don't drink. I didn't drink at that time because of medicine I take. I don't take it anymore, but I just don't drink. It's not fun to me. So anyway, I'd gotten down there, and with my one friend as well, who, mind you, before that, we actually had prefaced like, yo, his dad, our friend's dad, is racist. So if he says anything to you, bro, like, we can just leave. And he was like, oh, okay. He was kind of worried because we had said a lot about it. Like, yeah, man, like, we're like, apologies in advance if he says anything. So he was probably like super uncomfortable. But that's just how it is, unfortunately. I'm not going to say his father's a bad man, but I'm certainly going to say I disagree with how he treats people or how he has associations with certain people based solely on their skin tone before he even gets to know their name. But he was fine to my friend, so that's what matters at the time. Anyway, I had asked my friend, yo, dude, I got the grinder. You want to, get this party going? And he was like, my mom's here, and I don't want her to be mad. And I was like, huh? What? You're 21 today. I was like, there's like so many reasons why that was like not satisfactory for me. So he was like, that's not going to work out. And I was like, bro, are you kidding? We saved this for a year, bro. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, so this is actually in 2020. So this is like almost 5 years ago, like 4.5 years ago. It was in June or something. So what happened was, I hate saying that. What happened was, my friend and I, because he didn't really drink either, we were just going to go down the road to a gas station, and then we were going to get some wraps and then just, smoke, because we were going to like smoke to ourselves and then, whatever, away from everybody else so they couldn't see us. So we couldn't we just had to go get our own stuff, and we did our own thing for a second. So him and we actually had taken somebody else's car, because at the time, I don't quite remember. I think I had a car. It was 2020. I definitely had a car. I don't know why I didn't take my car, though. I can't think. It was a while ago. That's not what's important in this story, though. So I was driving somebody else's car, and they had a taillight out, and I had the weed with me, and my friend also had his weed with him. So we had, some weed in the car and some paraphernalia like the grinder and lighters and stuff. So I noticed that there's a car behind me, like trailing me for a while, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, it's probably a cop then. And we got weed in the car, and some other things. Not some other things. We only had weed. I only smoke weed. I don't do anything else like that. So anyway, we didn't even have the wraps. The place we went was closed. A gas station was closed. We actually went like towards a different one. We took like a back way, and we saw that there was a police officer behind us, basically, or what I thought was a cop, and I was right. So I'm at this stop sign. I'm gonna take a left or a right turn. And if I put my right dinker on, my blinker. I say dinker. It's just a colloquial thing for Binghamton, maybe, or where I grew up in Conklin. Anyway, but I put the left blinker or dinker on, or the right one, and then I switched it to the left, and then I went left, and then he immediately pulled me over. And I was like, great. Now, mind you, they were all on private property, and I could see his driveway from the stop sign. It was probably 200 feet. And if I wanted to, I could have just not pulled over and then just gone down his private property. And that would have been a problem. That would have been not cool, first of all. But most importantly, the friend who turned 21 that day for his birthday, or the day before, whatever it was, he was actually the oldest one in our friend group. Meaning everybody else that was there, like 8 or 9, 10, 12, however many other people, I think it was like at least 10 other people, were all underage drinking. So Jon is taking one for the team. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, whatever. So I tell my buddy, yo, hide the weed, dude. He hides his stuff. He like hid it underneath the seat, but he did not take the mason jar of weed in the center console. So as soon as the police officer rolled up to the window, he didn't say license and registration. Did you know you have a back tail light out? He said, oh, all right, first thing you can do is hand me that jar of weed. And I looked. I said, this jar right here? He goes, yep, hand it to me. So I said, can I pick it up? He goes, yep, hand it to me. I picked it up and said, sir, this is CBD flower. This is legal in all 50 states. You can buy it like milk at the store. He goes, nope, that's weed. I'm taking it. And I was like, okay, well, we're like boned already. Like, let's see what I can do. Okay, I gotta insert one extra part of the story here. Jon was a plug for a little bit. Jon sold weed to people, but that's okay because he doesn't do it anymore, and he hasn't in a while. Mind you, yeah, I'll put it this way. I may or may not have had a lot of other things on me that were more important than what he found in the center console. That was apparent from the window, so he could see that, and reasonable suspicion and having reasonable suspicion to be able to search a car is like plain sight. So when he came up to the car window, the police officer looked in my car and he saw that there was a jar of weed. He was well within his right to say, I think that's weed. I'm suspecting that is weed. I can take that. And yeah, that's what he did. Mind you, Jon is a smart guy. Jon is a very smart guy. And Jon is a very considerate guy. So let me tell you the rest of this story. So immediately I knew things were going to get hairy. I had, or maybe did not have, I had or possibly did not in the realm of possibility, marijuana carts and gummy edibles with insignias from California with clear warning labels on them indicating that it was a marijuana product. Mind you, having that in Pennsylvania is a meth charge, or it was at least. It was a meth charge, meaning that if it was meth or if it was a marijuana cart, you're getting charged the same. Now, Jon is smart. Jon also had a knife on his, a big knife, like a 3-inch blade on his right side of his pants. And when the police officer saw that weed and I had said something like, this is CBD, the next word out of his mouth were, want to step out of the car? Jon is smart. Jon is not getting tased in the nutsack. So Jon steps out of the car. Immediately I'm like, all right, we're boned. We're, cooked. Whatever at the time was popular. Basically we're screwed. So he's like, okay, I'm going to have to search your person. Is there anything on you that can poke me, stick me, stab me? That's what they say every time. I had my knife on my pocket, and he's standing a couple feet away from me, so we weren't close at all. He was probably at the end of the car, and I was by my door getting out. And I go, oh, I got this knife right here, and I like turned my whole body towards him so he could see it, and I put my hands in my pocket and I grab it. You want me to grab it? I could grab it. He goes, no, I can grab it. Oh, you want to grab it? You want to grab it? Yeah, I'll grab it. I said, okay. I put both my hands in the air. He came over. He pulled it out of my pocket. He goes, wow. It's a 3-inch blade. He goes, what do you use this for? I said, I'm an ice cream man, and I open bags of ice, so I need a utility knife when I work. He goes, okay, fair enough. And yeah, that's 100% true. That's the most truth I told him that night. And he goes, okay, is there anything else that I got to worry about? I said, no, sir. He goes, all right, well, thanks for being honest with me. I was like, holy shit, he's not going to fucking search me? He's not going to search my body? He's not going to search my person? The answer to that was no. He did not. He did not search my pockets. He did not search my person. He did not search anything. My jacket, nothing. And that's a good thing. Anyway, what he did search was the rest of the car. And he found my friend's weed and some lighters and the grinder that had a year's worth of keef in it for a special occasion. Which sucked because we really were like stoked for that. We didn't even get to smoke it. So we basically saved it for over a year. It was over a year too. And we didn't even get to use it. All right, but here's the part that's relevant to racial profiling and why I hopefully will never be considered somebody who has racial bias. I'm a good guy, trust me. So, as I said, people or the police officers, in my understanding of northeastern Pennsylvania, can be racist. So, when the police officer said, now whose weed is this? John Holmberg said, that's mine too. He said, all of it? I said, yep. He goes, okay. And, he like talks to my buddy there, says something, whatever. But I'll never forget this look. When the officer says, whose is this? And I said, that's mine too. I said, everything's mine. Everything, that's all mine. The look on my friend's face, he was like looking at the ground already, but he like kind of peeked up at me. The corner of his mouth just kind of like, it almost smiled, but it like went flat. It was like just a flat, like his cheek kind of buckled a little bit, like if you ate something sour, like if your teeth kind of chomped a little bit and you got like puckered up. Just kind of like half of his mouth was flat and the other kind of like picked up his cheek a little bit. And just kind of like shook his head. Like not like shake his, like no, like nodded his head, like yeah. Like once or twice, like Because I knew what was going to happen to a 19-year-old black kid who was in northeastern Pennsylvania and who had been pulled over for weed in the car. I'll tell you what happened to me, and we can debate in the comments if this would have been as easy as he got off. So I'd gone on, I had to go to court, I had to go to many different municipal buildings, and it was like a year-long process. So fast forward 1 year to like August of 2021, I'm dealing with this already. Or actually, I think it was like a little bit before the summer. Anyway, so eventually I finally speak to somebody, and there was a couple things that I wanted to like actually take to court. I didn't have a lawyer. They couldn't give me a lawyer. They weren't willing to give me a lawyer, or they didn't want me to have a lawyer, because as many times as I was like, hey, I can't afford a lawyer, I'm supposed to get one, right? They said, you make too much money. I said, I'm an ice cream man who started this business like a year ago. There's no way that I make too much money to afford a lawyer when I can't afford a lawyer. Like that doesn't make sense at all. So I actually ended up representing myself. That was tough. And we never actually went to court, but we went through pretrial proceedings. We went all the way up to jury selection. We were going, the next step was, my last time that I was there before we made a decision of where to go, when I actually got a court appointed lawyer. He sat down with me. We went over all the information that I had and everything, and basically told me like, yeah, that's a good idea what my case was. We're not going to get into specifics because it's irrelevant. He said, but I don't think the court's going to see it that way. So it's with that in mind that basically I didn't have a case. So I was like, okay, well, it's good to know that now, right? A year and some later. Anyway, so I ended up getting put on probation, and it was going to be a year's worth of probation. And I was going to get drug tested, and I'd have to come in once a month to do a drug test, and they were going to pop in. So let me tell you about probation. There's a couple things. You cannot drink. You cannot smoke. You can smoke cigarettes, I'm pretty sure, but you cannot drink alcohol. You cannot be drunk. You cannot smoke marijuana or use any drugs. You cannot be under the influence. You cannot have in your possession, meaning I had to forfeit a lot of my things to, not a lot of my stuff, but some of my things to my roommates at the time. That being lighters, that being knives, that being anything that was considered a weapon. I had a machete. I still have a machete. It's a weapon. I couldn't have that anymore. Everything like that. So, he goes outside and he's smoking. He goes, hey, any chance you pocket my lighter? And I'm like, no chance I pocketed your lighter. He goes, oh yeah, my bad. I was just like outside with him while he was smoking. But no, truly, not a single time while I was on probation did I get high, did I drink or anything like that. And that's a responsible thing to do. If anybody out there is on probation, don't try to mess with that. Just get your sentence. It could be so much worse. Take it from John Holmberg. So I'll put it this way. My 1 year of probation with drug testing and with random visits to our house to see if I was, still conforming to the law, never happened. And that 1 year of probation turned into 6 months. And it was through the ARD program, which is for Pennsylvania. I went to Montrose, and that was where everything was. Anybody familiar with Montrose? Go tell me how many people that are not white are in Montrose that are treated the same way as everybody else. By that, I mean, if you're white in Montrose, and sorry if this is a little bit of a take, but you're probably treated with a little bit of a higher regard than somebody who wasn't white. I can say with almost, I'll say with certainty. I mean, you can say with certainty that a racist person probably exists in every, town in this country. But I will say with certainty that I know in my heart of hearts, If my friend was in my position, one, he would not be getting off probation in less than a year. Two, he might not even gotten probation. He might have actually gotten jail time. I got no community service, nothing. Three, I never got drug tested, and my PO never visited my house, not a single time. I didn't get drug tested when they took my mug shots. I didn't get drug tested a single time. He never came to my house. He never checked in on my apartment to see if if I was doing things the right way. None of that. Tell me if I was not a 21 or 21-year-old white kid, if I was going to be treated the same way in Montrose, Pennsylvania, after I got caught with weed. I would wager, no, I would not be treated the same. I would wager I would be treated much worse and possibly still have lasting consequences. The ARD program is for people that get DUIs. If something like that happens and you have to get some type of punishment, it's your first offense. After you serve whatever it is, whether it be jail time, whether it be probation, or whether it be whatever, it gets expunged from your record, meaning if I go to Pennsylvania, it's not on there. I didn't even know that existed. And that wasn't until my last day with the court when I finally got to speak to a lawyer. But it wasn't until I had that conversation that I knew that that was my only option. My only option was to take the probation and to just ride it out. I can't imagine that my friend would have gotten the exact same. I can't imagine that. So it's with that in mind that for no apparent reason other than I know that the court system would go easier on a white boy, did I say that all of his marijuana and all the it's just marijuana, like I said, that all of his stuff was my stuff. He didn't get a ticket. He never paid a fine. He never saw a judge. And I'm happy for that. Unfortunately, him and I really aren't friends anymore. I don't talk to him, unfortunately. But I'm happy that I did that for him. Very happy that I did that for him. Because he could get a record. Something as stupid as that, you can get a record. Maybe they didn't, maybe they knew that the ARD program existed and they would like to apply that to his case. But maybe if they had a certain bias, and possibly they did have a certain bias, but I wouldn't be able to tell, that they would not offer that to him. And because if he went through the exact same process, the exact same way I did, leaving that information out simply because they don't want to offer that to him is a possibility. So he could have been in jail. And that jail is not if you're not in that ARD program, that's going to be tough. Whether it be 90 days in jail or whether it be 3 years in jail. So, and then they could have just made it even worse. They could have said it was drug trafficking. They could have said it was XYZ. And they probably would have tried. And that's the thing. I'm not going to say that every institution in the United States that regards, the judicial system is racist or prejudiced in regards, but they do certainly have biases in certain parts of the country. And I understand that Montrose, Pennsylvania, and northeastern Pennsylvania, we'll say New Milford, happened in Halstead, and it's under the jurisdiction of Montrose. So that's where we had to go. That's where I had to go. But yeah, so, I mean, I can give some other examples as well of Jon being a good guy, not being racist. But that's probably the best example I have of what I'm willing to do with, one, the information knowing that there's biases that exist towards people simply because of their skin tone or their race. And two, what I'm able to do because I know I have the balls to do it. Yeah, I can see that's a problem and I'm willing to do something about it. That's tough, but I did it and I'm very proud to say that I've done that. We're going to take a little bit of a break for a second so I can plug some people. Well, it's really just me. As everybody knows, Socks with Jon. Thank you once again for checking out Socks with Jon. So, hilariously enough, the videos on YouTube are doing better than the videos on TikTok. I have 32, at the time of recording, I have 32 subscribers on YouTube. I have 441, I want to say. I have over 440 followers on TikTok. And there's some videos that get over 500 views on here. And some of them get like 11 views. But conversely, on TikTok, I get anywhere between 250 views to about 500 views. And on average, that 500 is like maybe once every 5 to 10 videos. So thank you, everybody, once again, for checking out Socks with Jon. If you guys want to see a little bit more, I can absolutely do something exclusive for YouTube. But just as well, in the video I posted today, we're very close, or at least, I'm saving up all the money that I have for this particular thing. is that to make the investment so that before the end of this year, hopefully we can make the purchase to actually sell some socks, because that's the point. It is to not just have a personal brand because I love socks, but also, if people weren't aware, if I haven't said this before, the longest Socks with Jon segment ever, but is that for every pair that we sell, we donate a pair to a charity. I had a idea for a charity, but that actually got shut down. It was the Salvation Army on Court Street in Binghamton. That's the one we were going to collaborate with. It could be any Salvation Army, but it was specifically that one I wanted to work with. Not a problem, but basically people in the area. But that's the whole shtick, is that for every pair that we sell, we donate a pair. I'm very pro-community. I'm a humanitarian myself, and I understand that, if people want to have nice, funky, exciting things that make them happy, sometimes they have to spend money on that. And, if you have to spend a lot of money just to be happy, then, if you don't have a lot of money, maybe you're sad or maybe you're not that happy. So it would make me happy. It would make me ecstatic if people were wearing my socks and they actually liked them, especially if they got them for an affordable price. But also I got, to make enough money to keep it sustainable. And that's pretty much it. I've been in business for a while, so we'll have to do something when it comes to if we're gathering donations for this, because we will be donating 50% of our merchandise. It'd probably be best to try to raise some money through donations. So if you guys are interested in that, I will create a GoFundMe. I think actually one already exists, but maybe I'll just make a new one for Socks with Jon if you guys want to contribute. So hopefully we can actually have this vision launch, and I'd be very, very happy to continue Socks with Jon for the rest of my life. So as always, the Anyone You're Out podcast is brought to you by Socks with Jon. Likewise, any other businesses, somebody had reached out to me. I made a post on Facebook, and I had said, hey, if anybody wants to reach out and collaborate with me in my podcast, I would love to have your business on. Somebody did, and I had asked them today, actually, what they planned for collaborating, what they wanted to do, and I haven't heard back from them yet. But once I do, I'll be able to plug people in this specific segment of the show, which is just, any intern between, after Socks with Jon or before Socks with Jon, doesn't really matter. But at the time being, as you know, we only have Socks with Jon as our sponsor, considering it's, at the time being, the only other brand that's in business. As, Vibes Rolled Ice Cream is not operational. That was, brought to you by Vibes Rolled Ice Cream during September and October. Actually, I think I started the podcast again in October. So I guess October. But just as well, this is going to be the opportunity for people. We'll give you 1 to 3 minutes to just whatever you want. Not whatever you want. We'll do some vetting. Obviously, if I know somebody and I know what they sell or I know what they want to promote, it's going to be very easy to work with them. But if somebody's out of the woodwork from Louisiana, and they're like, hey, I have this great idea and I want to collaborate with you, I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. But please know that I will be doing vetting, so it can't just be like, ooh, I think you need this cream for your that thing. And I'll be like, we're not going to promote cream for your that thing on this podcast. Sorry, no cream for your that thing here. Anyway, we can talk about some of the other things that I had in mind for today's episode. It is our ideas for other episodes, pretty much. I can give you 4 examples possibly off the top of my head. And after I spoke to somebody today, my therapist actually, I'm hoping we can have somebody from either the Broome County or the Tioga County Jail come and actually speak on our podcast. I have some questions, and I'll put it this way. The way that I am, just the way that I speak, the way that I promote myself, I ingrain what I love in everything that I do, and vice versa. Everything that I do, I ingrain with, everything that I do, I ingrain with what I love. So I try my best to always be on, if you know what I mean. For people that work in business settings or corporate or in any regard, if you're like, oh, you're on, it's like you're willing to sell yourself, you're willing to promote yourself, you're awake, you're aware, you're educated, and you're prepared, basically. So we spent possibly upwards of 30 minutes, not 50 minutes, I was going to say 50%, half of the time with therapy talking about my podcast, which is fine because, she needed to learn about me. But one of the things my therapist asked, or I asked my therapist, is since you had, worked in the jail, can you tell me a little bit about mandatory minimum sentencing in Tioga County? And she had something to tell me, and I'd like to share that with you guys. So we'll have hopefully somebody on. I don't know if it can be her because of conflict of interest, if I hadn't said that already. And she had mentioned that as well. I was like, yeah, but maybe somebody if you're willing to reach out for me, because that'd be great. She had basically enlightened me and said, because of small-time corruption, small time corruption, but because it's small up there and they don't have the rehab and addiction centers that they need, what a judge will do. And she gave the example of somebody that was sentenced for 10 years. So say they were sentenced to jail for 10 years because there's no alternative for rehab. So instead of going to jail for 10 years, they could go to rehab for a year or a year and a half or 2 years. And rehab, I would probably wager, is a lot more conforming, or not conforming. Oh, I will say that. It's a lot more conforming for those that are struggling with drug addiction or any type of, addiction that they would need help for at rehab, versus getting thrown into, the mix, basically, in jail. That cannot be the right circumstance for somebody who's dealing with mental health issues in the regard of addiction. Now, addiction is not necessarily something that can be regarded as mental health. I personally believe that addiction can be propagated through issues with your mental health. But just as similar, I do believe that people can have addictive personalities and that there's genetic things within a person and their hereditarily that makes them more apt to be addicted to something. So, for example, I'll put my brother again, right? Or the lack thereof. This individual, he had confided in me, or he told me that he tried some other drugs and stuff like that. And I'm worried about that. Or I was at the time. I don't really mind so much anymore. I don't care. But I worried because I knew he had a very addictive personality and that he obsesses with things. He'll get something that he likes and he'll take it to the extreme. He'll find out everything about it. Sure, maybe he's got some ADD or ADHD where he likes something and he's like all about it, super obsessive. But then there becomes the unhealthy side of that, where it's like, okay, I'll put it this way. He's making dabs. If you guys are familiar with dabs, it is basically resin. It's the oils that you can extract from the THC, or from the weed flower, and it's basically pure THC. It is the resin in, then you put it in. It's the closest weed looks like smoking crack. I'll put it that way, because you get this little glass piece. You have to heat it up with a blowtorch, and then you put this resin, this piece of like shattered resin on there. And then there's all these different types of things that you can like stick it with. You could get like a spoon that stirs it and breaks it all up so it turns into smoke easier. Well, he got onto that, and so he started making his own after he started growing his own weed. And what ended up happening is that he kind of got addicted to it. And I'll say that, yeah, you can get addicted to anything. Absolutely. If you've ever seen the TLC show My Strange Addictions, where people are like, I'm addicted to eating bricks. It's like, huh? Like, oh yeah, I eat bricks, or a girl eats mattresses, or like crazy stuff like that. But the people really just get hooked on it, and it's like, I don't even know what to say. So you can get addicted to anything is what I'm trying to say. But with my brother, or with him, he was basically growing his own weed and then making his own dabs, which turned into like doing dabs all day, every day, which is dangerous because it gets you high. It gets you probably... I don't think there's, outside of straight injecting, and I do not recommend that. Not that I've done it, but I do not recommend people inject anything that's not. Don't inject. Just, how about that? Most of the people that are listening are probably not doctors and have probably not tried to inject anything into themselves. Just don't. Just continue that trend of not doing that. So with that in mind, dabs is possibly one of the strongest ways that you can get high from marijuana. So when you start basically going and using in a sense, the hardest or the strongest form of marijuana, and you have an addictive personality, and all you're doing is basically that, that looks like an addiction, 100%. And it becomes unhealthy when you're like, dude, I can't even talk to you right now because you're like zonked, like you're just too high. And you're never not going to be high because you like it so much. Like, do you see where there's a problem with that? When you stop doing the stuff you need to do because all you want to do is just get fried. So I think at some point he stopped. I told him dabs are not an everyday thing, and he did not listen to me. I told him that before, and I don't know what he's up to now. I don't think he makes dabs anymore. I don't know. I have no idea. He could be doing meth. For all I know, I have no idea. I don't talk to the guy. But what I'm trying to say is you can get addicted to anything. So it's when people have an addictive personality, you got to be careful with the information or, the things about stuff. The things about stuff. That's the stupidest I've ever sounded on this podcast so far. But you just got to be careful with the certain things or the certain things you say, pieces of information that you're willing to share. Because if somebody takes that with the wrong intention, they can do something and say that it was because of you. Obviously, look, we want to talk about a conscience. This guy's got a conscience. But there's been things that have happened that I can't blame myself for because I did the best I could while I did. If anybody's familiar, and I'm sure I've spoken about him many, many different times on this podcast now, but my friend who had died, who had killed himself last year, I can't feel guilty for that. And I don't feel guilty for that because at the time, 2 years before he had done that, I had actually done a lot for him. And so it's with that in mind that I know there's not much else I probably could have. But that's not true. I could have absolutely done more, but I didn't know at the time that I needed to. It was just somebody else's turn, in my opinion. So I don't feel guilty for that. And I can't imagine I would feel guilty if somebody said, "Oh, Jon, I heard your podcast and went and did something terrible." Because you should know by the words that I use, and especially this exact example of me saying that you shouldn't use our words to do harm, that you should take our information and you should use it to build with, and you should be constructive with the uses of information. Otherwise, I don't want you on this podcast. I don't want you to listen. If you're just going to take what I have and try to ruin it or use it in a nefarious way that would tarnish our reputation or even worse, harm somebody, we don't want that. So hopefully, and I do try to say in as many podcasts as possible, 1, what we stand for, 2, what we expect out of people, and 3, what we promote. Obviously we stand for the fight against disinformation and misinformation campaigns. That's been our primary focus since the beginning of COVID and since the initial inception of this podcast. We don't want any hate speech, and we try our best to steer clear of things that are overtly political because there's not always, it's hard to talk in absolutes, but there's not always a reason to bring up political conversation. Once things start getting political, you kind of lose a portion of the conversation because people recede into a different stance, or they change how they're talking, or they need to react in a way to confirm or disprove a certain belief. So it's just a topic of conversation we try to steer relatively clear of. But those, these are the things we stand for. And like I said, we don't want people to use our words or the information that we give you guys in forms of violence or to hurt people. Try your best to be a better person every day, even if it means yesterday you didn't do so good. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm saying, man. You know what I'm saying? I know this podcast has been all over the place today. Absolutely bonkers. We really didn't have any core things to speak about outside of what's expected to come soon. Like I said, this is perfect. I remind myself because I have nobody to do it for me. But the 4 podcasts, that I want to have next are as follows. They're not in any particular order, but I did have a poll on the community tab, which I guess nobody saw, but that makes sense because I don't ever see anything from the community tab on YouTube. Just as well, these are the 4 options. I wanted to have somebody on from Kosovo who can speak about the relationship between Kosovo and the United States and the history of Kosovo. I got to speak to a lot of people on Reddit that were Kosovars. Or I think it's Kosovo. You can be a Kosovan or a Kosovar, which is both the same thing from my limited research. I just asked like ChatGPT and then I Googled it and I got the exact same answer. So I was like, okay, it must be the case, or at least accepted enough to where that's what people refer to them as. Somebody that lives in Kosovo is a Kosovar. I got to speak to some of these people and they told me about how they survived genocide and how the U.S. intervened, and Bill Clinton has a statue there for what he's done. I thought that was incredible that we didn't know about this, but in 1998 and 1999 there was a genocide of the ethnically Armenian people by Serbian nationals. And I found that very interesting because I had no idea. I had never heard about that in my entire life. It's the first time I'd ever heard. I knew what Kosovo was. It's a country in Europe. And I was like, okay, and I see that there it is, Kosovo. But I didn't know that they had a song called Thank You USA that slaps. And it's basically, it's precisely that. Bill Clinton intervened during an attempted genocide of ethnic Armenians. And then the state of Kosovo was established in 2008. And it's one of the newest countries on the planet. I think the current newest country on the planet is still South Sudan since 2011, I want to say, since the Civil War with Sudan and then the southern Sudan. So there's Sudan and then South Sudan. And I actually got to confirm this information. The only reason I bring it up, while I was Ubering last year, I got to Uber a Sudanese person, and he was astonished. He was so impressed, and he felt so happy to know that I knew the history of his country. And that is part of the reason we do it. Because when people feel included and they feel like they have a spot in this damn world, they deserve to feel like that. And I was so happy to be able to give that to them. I explained as much as I knew about the Sudanese people and how, there was a civil war in South Sudan, and he was just like, I don't know. He was thankful. And that's it. But beyond that, we're going to have somebody on, hopefully, if I can convince, and they're going to speak to us about the history of Kosovo, which will be very interesting. Secondly, we have the modern prison system in the United States. This is just off the top of my head. I'm not reading these here. The modern prison system in the United States, as many people know, is very crooked and is a business. And a lot of jails need to stay open to make money. So in order to do that, they have to arrest people and sentence them to jail for extended periods of time. And also the use of slave labor, and effectively, it's not unconstitutional the way the 13th Amendment is written. Slavery is abolished in all forms except for forms of punishment. And so that's why, a lot of things are made, and we'll get, this is just a little bit of prerequisite. So if people want to decide, if this is the information they want to hear more of, absolutely. But for this one, a lot of slave labor comes from prisons, and a lot of things are actually made from prisoners, if you guys weren't familiar with. Depending on the state, certain amounts of goods actually are made from prison populations, which is slavery. Yes, maybe they're bad people, and sometimes they're compensated, but it's pennies to the dollar, like actual pennies to the dollar. I'd like to have somebody on so we can speak about that. Possibly somebody my therapist knows, or my therapist themselves. That'd be cool. Maybe. We'll see about that. Secondly, I wanted to have a teacher speak about this because it's a very frightening reality for a lot of us, especially myself, because my father's a teacher. I do worry about this, especially because where I'm from, we had actually had something happen. We're not going to talk about that because we're trying our best to dismiss the association with the terrible, heinous mass shooting that had happened, but it did happen, and so it's a worry of ours. I want to have a teacher on so we can talk about mass shootings as well as kind of the dynamic of teaching, at least in New York State, because as a lot of people are familiar with the hopes and what the next incoming administration might bring is that the abolishment of the Department of Education. Now, through our understanding, because New York is, I think it's like 9th or 10th in the country for education, we would probably do better without it, and I'll tell you why. We might do better without the Department of Education because we're able to spend money differently. If the federal government is telling New York exactly how they need to set up their schooling system, but they don't have the same standard for all other states because we're so much higher on the list. Even for a state that's like 10 rows below us, if it's like if we're the 9th, if they're the 19th, the 19th state standard of education is going to be much lower than New York. So it's with that in mind, especially for New York being, I think it's like the third biggest economy in the United States is New York. I think it goes California, Texas, New York, Florida. And then I don't know from there. Sorry to say. But at the very least, I know that I'm pretty sure. I can almost say with certainty. I know this information exists and I've seen it. But I'm pretty sure that New York is either the third or the second largest economy in the United States. So that means that we collect a lot more taxes and our state makes a lot more money than some other states. Like Oklahoma, I believe, is 49th in education. Now, they're a state that abolishing the Department of Education would be terrible for, because that means that they now have to, with their resources, which are limited, considering they're 5th or 49th in the country for education, they now have to basically reform or commit to forming something new, their idea for a statewide Department of Education. Because without the Department of Education, a lot of things don't happen. Some of those things are like grants or scholarships or, basically those two things, the delineation of who gets those. So for Pell Grants or federal grants, that would come through Department of Education. It's interesting. And then, let's see, so we have the modern prison system in the United States. We have Interview with a Kosovar, We have mass shootings and, or I guess we could say school shootings and the Department of Education. And then lastly, I don't remember what my last one was, so I actually do have to check. Lastly is FDA-approved poisons. Basically, I'll put it like this. There are certain chemicals in your food, and there are certain hormone blockers in your food that disrupt your kind of way of life, we'll say. Not so much like, what you can and can't do, but the reason may be that you suffer from mental health issues, or that you have a intolerance to certain foods, or that you can't sleep at night. It's a very, very new form of research when it comes to understanding what food is good and bad for you and what certain chemicals do on the body, especially those that are that have anything to do with your hormone receptors. That's a very dangerous thing. Even anything that you drink out of it. Specifically, what I'm trying to say is that certain plastics, microplastics, can disrupt your hormones, your hormone distributors. And that is a big, big problem. And it's super underdeveloped as far as research is considered because of how new this information is. We might have believed that 10 years ago, I believe, oh gosh, how long ago was that? Obama was, 2016. So over 10 years ago, possibly, I can't say. But Obama, during his administration, had banned a certain microgel because they had very small particles of basically non-degradable waste. If anybody remembers, and this is kind of weird, but there used to be soaps and things. They were like foamy soaps that had these little like blue balls or like little things in there. And those were actually non-degradable plastics. And so the problem is they became smaller and smaller until we couldn't filter them out, and they stuck in the water sample or water samples that we tested, or the water, I guess just in general. What am I trying to say? Like the oceans or our drinking water. And then once those get into the body, we didn't know what that did, but we had an idea. If foreign objects are getting into your body and they're attaching to portions of your body and they're disrupting, how your hormones are regulated, or it could be as far as your mood, your appetite, how you sleep. If things are bad enough, it can, regardless. We can talk about this more in depth, but FDA-approved poisons and microplastics in food is option number 4 for topic. So once again, from the top, the modern prison system in the United States, school shootings in the Department of Education, FDA-approved poisons, and an interview with a Kosovar, in the history and relationship between the United States and Kosovo. Those are our 4 next options. Those are I did put a poll to see which one we should do next. We're going to do all of those. So that's pretty much going to be it for today's episode. Thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in. I'm John. Right, but truly, we are going to wrap up here today. That's going to be everything. Expect those next 4 videos to each include a special guest. And I think going forward, we're going to try our best to always include a special guest. I think this video is going to be about 50 minutes long, maybe about 40 minutes. We'll see what that ends up being, which if it's actually sub 41 minutes, it'll be our shortest video so far. But once again, we are trying to decide what is best. What's best for formatting, best for video length, best for topics, conversation, presentation of information. There's a lot of things. This is episode 13 for us today. Happy to be here, 25 years old finally, and I think a lot of things are going to change for me in a really good way as long as I keep working for them. So thank you once again, everybody, for tuning into the IOEO Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John. Get excited for our next couple of episodes, and I will see you all again very, very, very soon, I'm sure. Thank you all for watching, and take care for now. Adios, mis muchachos, and peace out.